Welcome everyone to an episode of I Didn't Sign Up for This. Let's find out what we just did not sign up for today. Carrie, what did we not sign up for? Let's talk about it.
Well, I think we need to talk about work ethic tonight. I think that there are doers and there are wheel spinners. And I think that we should visit that topic extensively because it's something that from an efficiency perspective, from a satisfaction, from a progression perspective, it keeps us from getting where we want to be.
Okay. So expound upon that for me.
Well, I've spent a lot of time in corporate America.
Yeah, you did.
And yeah, I sure did. I put in my time.
Oh, more than I could ever manage. Don't get me wrong. I love corporate clientele, but I'm good for about, 3 days on site. And then I'm like, okay, my clothes are starting to smell like cubicle. And so,
well, and I think that's where we work well together because I can tackle the corporate lions and you take care of everything else and we'll be good.
All right. Sounds good.
Anyway, in my experience throughout the years, and I have 20 years experience in a corporate environment, there are doers who get things done, who operate at optimal efficiency. And there are others, the rest of the group, who shift their strategic approach and spin their wheels consistently, day over day, month over month, year over year. And they are the hardest workers I have ever seen in my life because they are consistently working at spinning those wheels. And so there really is a call to arms in the sense of efficiency and working smart and not hard. And in every coaching situation from a corporate perspective, I have pursued that talk track. You need to work smart and not hard, because if you work hard, you will get nothing done. And for some reason, that's a concept that people struggle with. And I don't know if it's a validation tactic, and maybe it's subconscious, maybe it's not even a conscious thing. But I am absolutely the type of person that will get in there and find the most efficient way to do something so that I can move on to something else. But there is a base, and it is probably in any environment, whether it be corporate, small to medium business, personal life, you're working hard and not smart. So you are missing the big picture and how you can optimize your efficiency.
All right, excellent. I like the sound of that. I mean, I guess you call them key performance indicators for a reason.
Absolutely.
It seems like we ought to dwell on said key performance indicators. I mean, it goes back to some of the philosophies that I've espoused on some of my writings. I've actually mentioned this before, where I talk about the notion of, seek not to make weak things strong, but rather to make strong things stronger and weak things forgotten. And I try to live by that mantra as much as humanly possible. As far as people who truly do just spin their wheels, I think what they're usually doing is they're doing things that they're relatively comfortable with. They know they won't get in trouble for doing these things, but at the same time, they're not necessarily going to get all that much done. There's no innovation. With all innovation comes an element of risk, okay? Because you're innovating. You don't know if what you're doing is really going to be all that effective or not. And if it's not all that effective, then you're going to look bad. Well, you look bad often enough for long enough, and you're going to be looking for a job.
Oh, absolutely.
And so I think people default back to the core, repetitive, cyclical behaviors that allow them to look busy. It's funny, I just saw a rather blasphemous one-frame cartoon here the other day, oddly enough, in a spiritual magazine, e-zine website. But it's one guy sitting in a cube talking to another one, and he's got a Christian crucifix, a cross, on his desk.
Uh-huh.
And so he stands up in a cube and looks at a neighbor and he says, "Good news, Jesus is coming back. So look busy." Right? And it's just like, And I think we kind of live by that mantra. I think we do that to a large degree. There's no risk. There's no innovation, but there's no risk. You sort of stick your neck out and you're either going to get a promotion or you're going to get reamed, possibly fired. And so people are terrified of doing anything innovative and new and possibly increasing the level of their own productivity.
What about the people who don't even try? Because I agree, there are people that maybe for the sake of fear, they don't really try the innovation. But I have seen people who have burned themselves out working so hard and never getting anything accomplished because they don't see the big picture. So you have to have a goal. You have to have a starting point and an ending point. And that ending point needs to be something that provides momentum or something that provides accomplishment. And how many people get so caught in the details day over day that they don't think about where they want to end up. And I will be honest, I have seen this multiple times. You can float by giving the right answer at the right time and telling people what they want to hear, and then going back to your desk and looking at vacation destinations or looking at, where you're going to send your kids for summer camp or whatever that is. I have seen that consistently where people will check in just enough to stay under the radar.
Right.
But there is no satisfaction in that. So ultimately, you're really just kind of floating through, anticipating that everybody's so busy with their own jobs that they're not really paying attention to what you're doing. And if you can talk the talk for a minute, then you're okay. The problem is there's no structure. There's no end result. There's no goal in mind. There's no driving to the goal. It's just floating through and getting through each scenario as it comes at you. So each additional obstacle, you can catapult over those obstacles for only so long before it starts to impact your sense of well-being. You're not trying, you're not working. And as human beings, the desire to have success and the desire to achieve is part of our makeup, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. And I know exactly what the problem is, in my opinion. The problem is, and bear with me here for a minute, the problem lies in a minimum wage. That's our problem. And I know that takes it in a completely different direction, but bear with me, I'll explain it. Minimum wage is where it all starts. Because rather than a meritocracy, we have this thing called a minimum wage. So rather than be compensated based on the productivity that you create, which is the way the world works, by the way, from the days we were schlepping around in caves and we would go lurking through the forest and kill the wild boar and bring it back to the village. And we got the first cut off that wild boar, and whatever was left over fed everybody else. Why? Because we are the ones who brought it back. We're the ones who actually produced something. Now you go 10, 20, 30,000 years down the line, and that same level of meritocracy applies to the farmer. He goes out and he brings in a crop. And he gets the first selections from those crops. Even if he's part of a culture, part of a society, a tribe, or what have you, he is still the guy who benefits from his efforts. Now you get a little further down the line, maybe to where we are today. And all of a sudden, rather than reward specific productive behaviors that bring specific results, we reward the timely effort toward those results or the execution of that behavior, assuming, sometimes hoping that it's going to yield the desired benefit. And that's the problem. The whole world works in the way of you get compensated, you win when you produce. That's the way it's always worked. And now in our enlightened, advanced culture, it doesn't work that way anymore. It's you show up and you get paid. So if you back up and look at it, does it suit me to work really hard to dig this trench so I can get this cable down so that I can go on to the next project? Or does it suit me far better to lean on the shovel? Let's take all day to get this down.
Because it's an hourly rate as opposed to an accomplishment compensation.
Right. Nothing to do with productivity.
Okay.
If you don't produce enough, you will get fired. And so by virtue of that minimum wage, we've gone from a socioeconomic strategy that lends itself towards the benefits of productivity to one that lends itself to an adversarial relationship. Ultimately, the minute you come in and say, hey, look, it's not about how many tomatoes you grow. It's not about how many fish you catch. It's about how long you sit here and do this repetitive motion. And we are just going to pay you to engage in the behavior. It's in mankind's nature to simply resist that. Basically, what you're telling me is that you're going to pay me to sit here and do this thing over and over and over. And I'm not so terribly interested in doing this thing, but I'm willing to do it because there's money involved. I can feed my kids. But you're rewarding me for being a slack ass. You're rewarding me for not really producing a defined result. And so the adversarial nature of that arrangement comes into play, wherein management hates employees and employees hate management. And employees are going to do as little as they possibly can to earn that hourly wage. And management is going to pay as little as they possibly can to get the production from that hourly behavior.
But what about the people who don't look at it like that? Because I have never been that person where I'm just going to float through. Like if you give me a task or you give me a project or you give me something that I need to execute on, without fail, I'm going to do the best that I can every time. So, and for that, I've gotten tons of recognition throughout the years, right? And I'm not patting myself on the back, but I can't leave something undone, and I don't know how not to do my best. And so there are people out there like that who are working hard to complete the task that they've been given and not really taking it into consideration that, you know, they could lean on a shovel.
And those people tend to find themselves in management, correct?
Well, that's true.
There you go. You find yourself on the other side of that equation. Now you're the one up in the boardroom complaining that these lunkheads down on the floor are going to do as little as they possibly can to scrape up a little bit of money. When in fact, if you were to go in and you were to say, hey, look, here's the new strategy. Here's the profit we make on this. And this job that is either of greater productivity or greater risk, oftentimes both, is going to pay more and be tied to the bottom line. We produce more widgets. We produce more of whatever it is. And the people who take a bigger risk get a bigger reward. The people who produce more get a bigger reward. And the people who do both, they get an even bigger reward still. Now, what you do is you weed out the people who want to just lean on their shovel. And you find the people who say, look, I need 1,000 foot of trench today. Get on it, boys. Let's go. Let's go get what is ours. That's your human nature.
Well, and I think that from a millennial perspective, I think I can see that a little bit more, where the millennial base, they're absolutely showing up to work, but there needs to be some advantages, and there's an expectation that they're going to be compensated regardless of the level of work that they do. And that's not how it was for our parents or the generation before us or even our generation. You show up to do a job, but you put in your best effort, and then you are compensated according to the level of effort. And that's not necessarily true anymore. You're compensated for showing up, and then we hope that you provide that level of effort. And so from a business perspective, corporations and businesses that are supporting this millennial base are having to think differently now. They're having to, they're absolutely having, it's a completely different mindset because they're having to be strategic in what they offer in addition to that pay, because the pay is expected. I can show up and I can do a really crappy job, but you're still going to pay me because I'm showing up. And that's nothing other than the evolution of the different generations and the different obstacles that maybe that they face or the different strengths that they possess. It's not, millennials are not evil. But
no, I'm a big fan of the generation. I'm
Yeah.
a big fan of the generation.
But there's a free thinking perspective where it's not necessarily entitlement, but we're not tied to, with the millennial generation is not tied to how we need to drive a job well done. We just need to provide a service and complete the job.
That links back to the notion about 25 years ago, we migrated from a production economy to more of a service economy in the world. Now, and that's not necessarily good or bad. It doesn't really matter. It's the land of is. It is what it is. We moved to more of a creative / service-based economy. And so you have all of these people in the generation who have come up seeing themselves as providing a service, as opposed to creating something. And it's much, much harder to attach a paycheck to a service than it is a product. If I show up and say, look, Bob, here's 100,000 widgets, give me my money. That's a very simple exchange. Bob needs the widgets to go into the factory. Bob needs what you've got. And so it's easy to exchange and it's very easy to understand. Whereas you have this here lately, like I say, past 20, 25 years, people show up and say, did you feel good about the experience?
Right.
Because I'm in a service-based economy.
Right.
Well, that's very, very, very subjective, right? If I show up with 100,000 widgets coming out of a semi or on the back of a train, man, go count the widgets and write me a check. That is very objective. Make sure they're up to spec. Make sure the widgets are going to work and show me where to offload. And I'm going to go make some more. And so that's a fundamental difference in moving into this service-based economy, which we will continue to move toward. Here's the upside to the service-based economy, though. If you look at the world, and again, this is just the land of is, I'm not bragging here. You look at the world, and especially here in the United States of America, we are the thought leader for the world. And that would probably make a lot of people in Europe angry. I don't care. Because I can back it up. I can back it up with facts, you know?
Yeah.
What clothes are people wearing? What beer is the world drinking? What CDs or DVDs are you watching? CDs are you listening to? MP3s now. The crazy kids with their MP3s. You kids, get off of my yard with your MP3s and your... Yeah. Anyway, so, but that's what's really happening. From a creative standpoint, we are providing a creative service out into the world, and we are the absolute thought leaders in that space. You look at where some of these economies are going with social media, with YouTube content. Sorry, YouTube is the new TV. It's the new ABC, NBC, CBS, Fox.
Right.
That's where it's going. You're not going to stop it from going that way. There might be some competitors. And that's great because competition helps everything. But there is no denying that that's where it is. And there is no denying that it is that American spirit, the millennial generation that is creating that content and providing those services. Okay?
Right.
And so I'm a big fan of the millennial generation simply because they have a different attitude and perspective in terms of quality of life.
Agreed. I agree with that 100%. They are no longer putting their shoulder to the wheel with their head down, making sure that the results are driven for somebody else to reap the reward.
That is right.
And I think that there is a freedom in that. They want balance. They want the flexibility that is required to have a work-life balance. And it's admirable. How do you keep and maintain your productivity and balance the necessity of that generation? Because that is the strategy that businesses are working to come up with now. Every business.
In my opinion, the answer is simple. You define what creates value for your business. You kernelize it. Then you ascribe a value to each individual kernel. And then you start paying by performance. You send people home to work. You let them come up with their own strategies.
Oh, yeah. And there are tons of companies doing that. But remember that the majority of management are not from the millennial generation. We haven't gotten there yet. And so you are looking at management that is working very hard to understand their perspective and the millennial perspective. And sometimes those don't see eye to eye, because I am part of that other generation. And I learned from my mother and her work ethic that you put in 100% all the time and you don't stop. You keep going and you keep that contribution alive and well. And it's for the greater good of the company, whatever company you work for and whatever size that company is. That is not the world we live in today.
That's right. And there is no right or wrong associated with that. But I can tell you, these companies will either adapt or die.
Absolutely. And a lot of companies are adapting well. There's telecommunication companies, Apple lets their employees work from home. There's all these different perks. We've got JetBlue. We've got, there's so many different companies that are accommodating that mindset. And I think that that's good because it's requiring innovation. But on the flip side, we also need to make sure that the contribution is equal to the innovation. So if I own a company and I am running a company and I need to be innovative to make sure that my employees are getting what they need, I need them to produce as well as that person from a previous generation that was working their butts off for me. And I'm not sure that we see that as much as we'd like to. So it goes back to the smart versus hard. I can work hard. I can spin my wheels all day long. I can exhaust myself. But am I getting the result? Am I increasing the bottom line? And am I driving the core function of the job that needs to be driven for success? Am I doing what I was hired to do? Because with that need for work-life balance, there's also a lack of loyalty. We are not loyal to our employers anymore.
Oh, of course not.
Because if you can't give me what I want, guess what? Somebody else can. And that's consistent at every level.
And conversely, if the company cannot give the employee what it wants, the employee is gone. And conversely, if the employee cannot give the company what it wants, the employee is fired, is gone.
Right.
So you're right. There is no loyalty. There is no long term. There's no long game anymore, by and large, right? People
Agreed.
Look at it from the perspective of what have you done for me lately and what can you do for me next, both in the seat of the employee and in the seat of the CEO and everybody in between. It's about commoditizing everything. And for better or worse, I think that's really the only way out. It's hard to commoditize creativity, but we're going to have to figure out a way to do it if we want this culture to continue to grow and thrive and survive.
Right.
You have, for the first time in certainly our lifetimes, probably in 200 years or better, the average size of the American home is beginning to go down.
Interesting.
The days of the McMansion are shrinking. The days of the McMansion are, I won't say over, but they are going away very slowly. I look at my grandparents, right? My grandma, who turns 100 in January, she raised her entire family and still lives, independently I might add, in a 640 square foot house.
Wow.
Okay. You think about a 640 square foot house, 640 square feet, 2-bedroom, 1 bath, a kitchen, a living room, little dining room in the kitchen area.
Right.
And she has lived there for 65 years. And everybody grew up and everybody was fine and everybody went out and had jobs and careers and got married or had kids or, pursued their own interests or life. Everybody was happy and well-adjusted and balanced, right? But you flash forward to even 10 years ago and houses are absolutely enormous because we live in this, the thing that the millennial I think is frustrated by, we live in this very consumer-driven society. And a lot of the millennials are quick to blame that on the notion of capitalism. But they misunderstand the difference between, there are 3 elements there. There is a free and fair and open market. There is capitalism, which blurs the line between free market and kind of what it is. And then there is consumerism, which is just consuming and throwing stuff away for its own sake so that you can keep the balance sheet growing and keep the bottom line growing. Okay, so the millennial has said, oh, screw the consumerism, right? I just don't want to do it, man. I just don't want to do it. I want to go hold somebody's hand, walk on a beach. I want to go surfing. I want to see some of the planet. I'm here for 80, 90 years, 120 if you're my grandma. And I want to live life while I'm living life. I don't want to go down to the factory and work my guts out for 40 years so I can give my kids a slightly better life and drop dead when I'm 65 or 70.
Right.
I'm not interested in that anymore. And bless them for it.
Yeah.
I think it's a much more balanced, enlightened perspective. We can, in fact, on a voluntary basis, shrink our lives a little bit. Not because it's good for the planet or any of that, kumbaya crap. And you can tell I'm not really into the kumbaya crap. I'm kind of a practical guy.
Really? I had no clue.
Don't want to reveal too much about my opinions and attitudes, but screw that. I reduce my quote-unquote carbon footprint. Why? Because it's cheaper. I can live in a little two-bedroom house in town, ride my bike down to work, have a nice little low-stress life, save my money, and fly to Australia. Go snorkel the barrier reef. Rather than watching some idiot do it on YouTube, I can go do it myself. It's real. And I think that is what that millennial generation really brings to us. It is a little bit of an emotional and psychological checkup for us to say, hey, what are you doing? We followed into this cycle championed by Eddie Bernays, right? Mm-hmm. So Eddie Bernays, nephew to Sigmund Freud, father of propaganda and modern advertising techniques. He's the wizard of Madison Avenue because he figured out, using psychology, a way to convince people that they want crap that they just don't need and oftentimes don't want. But now they believe they want it. They believe they need to compete. They believe their neighbors are judging them. When, as we've discussed on several occasions, your neighbors don't care.
Right.
You think the Joneses are worried about what you've got?
No, they're trying to keep up with themselves.
That's exactly right. They're trying to keep up with themselves. They don't care. They're not thinking about you. But you watch television, and there are a lot of little subtle cues to imply that they are, in fact, thinking of you. And that same sickness has moved over into the online world. This actually explains the rise of social media. Because we're tired of the disingenuous, inauthentic, one-way, carefully crafted message that tells us buy, buy, buy. I'm exhausted by that. Everyone's exhausted by that.
Yeah, I agree with that. Because there's we don't want superficial, we want meaning. It's almost like a renaissance. We want to find meaning and explore creativity and do all of the things that life has to offer. And you can't do that sitting in a cubicle 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, or at least the perception is that you can't. And so we're looking for ways to balance that. And the problem from a corporate perspective or from a business perspective is that we don't want to solve for that. We want productivity. We want to get the job done. We want to make money because at the end of the day, every business that is out there to make money. It's no surprise. Like, it's not a big secret. If you're in business and you're not making money, you're not going to be in business very long. And so we can pull at the emotional heartstrings of the generation, and even previous generations, because I am that person, like I said, works smart and not hard. I refuse to work hard. I look for the most efficient way to solve every problem that comes at me. And I would venture to say that there is a segment of the population, regardless of the generation, that will do the same because they are quick thinkers and they want to get the job done in the most efficient manner, get paid for the job that's completed, and move along with their life.
Right.
Right?
Right. I get that. I absolutely get that. I think that's human nature in general. Since the day we, were cast down from Mars onto this planet.
Oh, my.
Whatever it is, right? I don't want to, I don't want to say anything because I offend people no matter what I do. It seems to be in my nature, right? So I say something like, from the moment we crawled out of the primordial ooze, and then I've got, all my friends on this other side going, hey man, what's up with that primordial ooze? And then I say, from the day we left the Garden of Eden, I've got everybody else going, dude, you can't believe that crap. What's wrong with you? Right? And so that's my new story, is that Tiamat came into the solar system along with Nibiru. It hit the Earth. No, that's right. It hit a giant planet that we don't know, that was named Tiamat, the remnants of which became the Earth and the Moon. And now here's where we are. And the reptilian overlords are coming back. So you better get on it. You better look busy. Well, whatever the story is, right? People adopt all of these different sort of, spiritual or social, religious stories into whatever fits with their life. And no offense, but God bless them. That's great. Whatever makes you feel better, whatever makes you sleep well at night. I've got my own stories, and man, they make me feel better and they make me sleep well at night. So I'll leave that alone.
Well, I just fell from heaven, and yes, it did hurt.
It was very painful. And I happened to fell in Tennessee because you're the only 10 I see.
No.
All right. Okay, so here's the point to that crazy rant, right? Mm-hmm. The point is, since the day we got here from Mars, and now we don't remember it, since the day we did whatever we did to begin this crazy experiment called life, we have been seeking for the path of least resistance.
Yes.
And as soon as we find paths of greater resistance and compare them to paths of lesser resistance, we throw away the greater resistance and we keep the lesser resistance as long as it's accomplishing the same thing.
Oh, I agree.
Nothing wrong with efficiency whatsoever. That's what we do by and large. But yet, as you pointed out earlier, there are some people, we'll call them employees, who do go out and spin their wheels doing the same old repetitive, look busy kind of things.
Well, let me ask you a question on a completely separate note, Mars aside, heaven aside, whatever. How many of those people that spin their wheels and go through the motions have you ever seen that are truly happy with their job?
None of them. I've never seen any of them that...
Exactly.
If I have a meaningful heart-to-heart conversation with people, which, as you well know, I do quite a bit, and say, hey, look, it's the same question I ask everybody. Left to your own devices, nobody's taking notes, nobody's keeping score. You can engage in any behavior you want to. What's the behavior you engage in? And very few people ever come back and say, well, it's doing the exact job I'm doing right now.
Right.
And man, I tell you what, if you do come back and say that, you win. You have figured it out.
Yeah, I don't understand that because every job that I've had for a long period of time, I had to find some reward system within that job or it didn't last very long. I know people who are brilliant thinkers who have the ability to take a concept and make it reality, or they have the ability to execute on projects, or they have the ability to lead and run corporations and people and departments and what have you. But because they are spinning their wheels and they are working hard and they lose sight of the big picture, they don't progress the way that they should. And because of that, it incorporates a dissatisfaction. Well, I'm passed up for this promotion, or the boss tapped on somebody else to apply for a job over me. And that's awful. It's never, I could have done better. It becomes a me against the world, me against them scenario. And so we excuse this because we come back and fall on, I'm working hard. I'm working my butt off every day. What are you driving? What's the result? So that's great. You can be a mouse on a wheel and spin that wheel all day long, but where are you going? Where does it get you? And I think that that's the big picture that people fail to realize is that, yes, you can work hard and people are going to be like, he's a hard worker, or she's a hard worker, but you're never going to be recognized for the amount of work that you do if you're not driving the results. And in order to drive results, you have to be strategic. You have to be smart. Because I will tell you that the smartest people I know are not working as many hours in a day as the hardest workers I know.
Oh, no, hard work has nothing to do with it. If hard work were rewarded on this planet, there is not a woman over 13 anywhere in Ghana that would not be billionaires.
Right.
I mean, the level of work is just unspeakably hard, right? I've got a child on one hip, a child on the other hip, and I'm carefully balancing 100 pounds of water on my head walking back up to the village. We've all seen the pictures. Now, that's not the norm.
What was that documentary back in the day where the Coke bottle fell from the sky?
Oh, yeah, that was The Gods Must Be Crazy.
Yeah, that's what just popped into my head when you said that. But anyway, fine, I digress.
There is some of that out in the world, but that does exist, right? And so it's not about hard work. There is always a path of greater resistance that you can take to make whatever you're doing dramatically more difficult. And if you cannot realize a path of less resistance, then you do not advance as a culture or as an individual.
I think that's a valid point. My curiosity is piqued when I wonder how many people actually realize that. How many people truly understand that concept or that philosophy?
I think very few people understand it, because if many people understood it, you would have people figuring out some way to be compensated for their productivity as opposed to their time all over the planet.
But there's no way in a corporation today that saying from now on you're going to be paid based on your productivity. There would be such an outroar and an upset from employees who feel like that they wouldn't measure up. It would become an HR nightmare.
You're right.
If we were to implement that. It just would. So there's entitlement there. So I am entitled to a paycheck, but I don't necessarily need to exercise an extensive contribution to get that paycheck. I just need to fill a seat. And there's no innovation and no creativity. But do you know who that damages? The short term, it damages the company. Long term, it damages the person. It damages their ability to achieve, because we are built to achieve. We are built to win. We are built to survive. We are built to succeed. And that is the biggest disservice that people do in this whole scenario that we're talking about tonight. And that is the fact that I am going to give you minimal effort, or I'm going to potentially work hard and not smart, but I need you to pay me. But there's no self-satisfaction in that. So if you don't have the personality that you're ultimately driving regardless of the reciprocation from the business, if you're not driving just for the sheer satisfaction of driving, you are digressing to a point that you will atrophy. Your mind will atrophy and you will be miserable. And people fail to understand that.
Absolutely right. People don't realize it. But honestly, I tie it all back to the implementation of the minimum wage. And I know that makes me sound like this hardcore objectivist, which I would tend to agree with. I am basically a hardcore objectivist. Things are as they are. I don't ascribe good or bad to that. And so you've got to take a risk or produce something, hopefully both, in order to get paid. We've built a world where that's just not true anymore. And you're right. These businesses cannot kernelize. They cannot overnight change everything into a meritocracy where you are compensated based on what you bring to the table. It is absolutely moving in that direction. And for that, I blame the internet, or reward the internet, or credit the internet.
Why is that?
Well, because now all of a sudden we have a way to be apart and yet connected.
Okay.
We have lived forever wherein people had to come together in order to accomplish something. And now we can come together from afar. I mean, you and I are miles apart right now. I'm in my studio, you're in your studio, and we are producing this podcast. Why? Because internet, baby. Internet. That's the answer to everything. And so what happens is you're able to value whatever you produce or bring in the marketplace. I just had this conversation with my brother Chris, where we're talking about this new world that he's been involved with for 20 years. He is an engineer, right? And his whole job is to think of ways to make things better, faster, stronger, easier, less expensive. That's what he does. I make things do things in this physical realm, and they're better, faster, stronger, more affordable, whatever it is. Okay. So we're talking about the advent of there are little knickknacks, little toys that are available. The most popular that I've seen of late is these little triangular spinners that the kids have these days, right? Where they're holding the little bearing in the middle and they're spinning this thing around, and boy, isn't that fun. So I'm assuming that these things are being made by the bajillions in China and take a nice slow ride all the way over here to the States, where they are subsequently sold, only to find out when my son bought one that they were being created in this guy's garage because he has a 3D printer. He designed the spinner. And of course, everybody's got the spinners now. Now they literally are being created in China because there's a market for them. And we're very good at determining what the value of anything is in the marketplace. Price compression comes in, and we find the happy medium where it's worth what people are willing to pay. And you find out what that number is very, very quickly. It's Adam Smith's, unseen hand. Nonetheless, when this thing started, and certainly the guy that he bought this thing from, he's got a 3D printer at home. He orders the little steel ball bearing cased bearings and prints these little triangular spinners at home and puts them together because he can print them for $1.50 and he can sell them for $15. And that is where the market is really going. It's going to become disparate and kernelized. We are going to be more connected via technology than we ever have been face to face. And are we going to lose something? Are we going to lose a little bit of our humanity? Damn right we will. We absolutely will. People are already struggling with notions of true intent and body language, and you don't understand what somebody's really saying. Right? I can't tell you how many times I have seen these young girls. I've got a 16-year-old girl. She doesn't necessarily do this, but I've seen her friends do this. Get a text from a boy and agonize rereading the same 15-word text over and over and over, trying to determine what this fool means by whatever the 15 words are. What do you think he means? What should I say back? I don't know. Right?
Yeah.
And I, of course, being the hairy old curmudgeon objectivist, say, why don't you call him and say, hey, buddy, what do you mean by that? Right? Go find out.
They won't, though.
We won't do it. We won't do it. We won't do it. It's interesting. I saw a comedy piece just the other day where this comedian, I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but he's doing this whole bit about how when he was a little boy growing up, we're sitting around the dinner table talking about school and sports and what have you. Ding dong, the bell rings. Everybody jumped up excited. There's somebody at our house. This is fantastic. There's somebody came to see us. Let's go see who it is. Mom, Dad, all the kids and the dog will go stand at the front door and open. Welcome. Right. Welcome to our home. It's so good to see you. And he compares that with his life now. Now he's the 50-year-old dad with the teenage kids. Ding dong. What? Who the hell is that? Somebody's at our house, right? And there's all of this terror associated with, who could it be? I don't know. Well, check your phone. Do you have text messages? Did you get a text message? Is somebody coming over? And that's, turn off the lights, hide behind the couch, don't say a word. That's what we have become, though. That's what we have become. And for better or worse, you hand it over to the technology. Nobody rings a doorbell anymore. They send a text from the yard. They send a text from the driveway or the street in front. I'm here. Do you want to come out or should I come in or what should we do? But the doorbell, you could do away with doorbells entirely except for, FedEx and UPS. You don't even need a doorbell.
Well, so here's the thing. That's a concern for me because the human experience requires human experience. And if we are relying on technology, it's just like I watched an article I watched a news report the other day about a bar that is in the desert in Arizona. And the newscasters actually pointed out, hey, did you notice that everybody in this bar, nobody was using their phones because reception is poor. And so nobody can use their phones. So, oh, wait, does that mean that there's actually a place on this planet where we can go and we have to talk to each other because there's no point in using the phone?
There you go.
There's no point in text messaging or checking Facebook to see what everybody else is doing while I'm sitting in front of the people that I'm supposed to be having a good time with. Like that is a concern for me, because with that, there is a loss of human understanding and interaction and compassion and love for one another. And from my perspective and where I'm sitting, maybe it's from a life coaching perspective and understanding that we have this life, and this life is to gather all of the experiences that we possibly can, not all of the experiences we can from a 4-inch screen.
Okay, yeah, I get you. Super romanticized. I agree. It does take away from the human condition, but guess what? We've done it before, right? We did it with Gutenberg and the offset type press. Predicate to having block type put in a press and having the Bible first, and of course words and stories and thoughts, predicate to having that be able to be printed on a mass scale. We sat around and told stories. I mean, there were a few monks who carefully scribed, right? But nobody owned a book. Nobody read a book. But yet the stories of generations past moved forward, and they literally moved forward in story tale form. And when that press came out, all of the hairy old curmudgeons were going, this is destruction of mankind. We're losing our humanity. We're not sitting on the porch or outside the hut or on the ship. Or we're not regaling the stories of our youth. You give it 50 years, people won't be able to remember their middle names because they can't remember the story of who they are and where they came from, because all of it's written down now, and that is going to destroy our planet. That is going to suck all of the humanity right out of us. And that, hundreds of years ago, that created a fundamental shift in the psyche of this planet. And it's happening again with these little devices. And we survived that one. As a matter of fact, I dare say we have dramatically more recorded data, information, scientific progress. Talk about standing on the shoulders of giants for new scientific discoveries, right? Mm-hmm. We have it because we were able to write it down and record it. And now we're engaging in the digital shift where, quite seriously, ask the NSA, they're listening tonight, ask the NSA to play back the last 6 minutes of this conversation. They can, because everything is being recorded, because we have the capacity to do it.
Right.
And it will lead to a different world. Just like the world of the storyteller eventually sort of went away or migrated into other forms. It didn't go away, but it migrated. It adapted to the new technologies. And now it's all happening on YouTube. Have you seen these crazy things called vlogs?
Oh, yeah.
Video log of my life every day. I get up, I take a shower, I have eggs for breakfast. Ooh, I mean, it's just like not terribly exciting stuff. And yet there are people out there creating these daily vlogs that have 5, 6, 7 million subscribers. People who get on to the YouTube. The YouTube. And on a daily basis, watch a total stranger have an average, ordinary day. Why, you ask, though? Why do we do that? Because number one, we're starved for connection. Number two, that's the only thing to satiate that starvation. It's the only thing we have. Because we're not talking to people on the phone and we're not engaging with people face to face. It's all just slowly changing to this digital communication world. Is it good or bad? Don't care. It is what it is. And I think it's far too far down that road to change it now. It's not going to change. But it does create a very interesting opportunity. And I'll get it back to business here for a minute. Here is the opportunity that is created by this current condition. And that is quite simply, you find the person who speaks both languages. You find the person, or maybe you are the person who understands this advent of social media, of recorded everything, but yet also understands people and body language and how to communicate on that level. That guy could go out and just sell snow to Eskimos. That man, that woman, that person could go out and make $1 billion. Most of these people who are so absorbed by their phones could not sell a life raft to a drowning man. They would just, let me text you a price. You get back to me via text. No, dude, I'll pay anything for it. My kingdom for a horse. Okay, well, should I send you a brochure? I don't want to be pushy. And that is what we are losing in this millennial generation and the advent of these technologies, is the capacity to engage with someone face to face without any fear of judgment or any fear of just fear. I mean, I see kids up and down the street who are just absolutely terrified to knock on the door of their neighbor and say, can I borrow a cup of sugar? Whereas, in the world that you grew up in, and especially the one I grew up in, because I'm a little bit older, man, it was straight up, I was Opie Taylor, and my dad was Sheriff Andy. We were over borrowing sugar and loaning sugar or giving whatever to all the neighbors all the time. I knew every name of every kid in probably a 4-block radius. I knew all of their parents' names. I knew their siblings and their dogs, their cats. I knew everything about everybody.
And today we don't even know the neighbors that live beside us. Yeah.
And I agree. Today we don't know the neighbors that live beside us. We don't engage. And when you try to engage, people think you're a weirdo. They're terrified.
There's something wrong with you.
Now, I'm not ascribing meaning to it. Is it good? Is it bad? Don't know, don't care. Where's the opportunity? That's what I really focus on.
Well, I think the opportunity is in finding balance. Because if you swing one way or the other, obviously in this society, you're not going to produce the way that you need to be successful.
Well, and that's why I think some of these business notions, like the minimum wage, like going into work every day and sitting in a cube, I think it's going away. I think I might not live to see that, but I think in another, 50, 60, 70 years, it won't be a thing at all. I think we will be connected by our devices to the technology. And the notion of you've got to be at a certain place at a certain time for a certain amount of time will just be dead and gone, certainly in the first world.
Right.
And I think the companies with a long-term vision need to see that right now and start dancing to that tune.
Oh, agreed.
Because that's what people want. That's just what people want. It's just the next obvious evolution of our society.
Well, I think this has been a great conversation. I truly believe the one takeaway from all of this, if I had to sum it up in a sentence, would be work smart, not hard, and do what you love. Because if you don't, you will spin your wheels repetitively and it will be to your detriment.
And I would say work smart and hard. Meaning, if you figure out a smart way to do something, scale it, right? Until you get what you want, but define what you want first. And I think that's where many people, that's where the bus stops for them, is that they're living life by default instead of by design. And so some of them are really happy with what they wound up with, but they didn't determine going in what they want. I mean, if what you want is to sit around, eat popcorn, and watch Netflix all day, there's a way you can do that. You might be living in your car watching Netflix on a laptop.
In Starbucks on Wi-Fi, maybe.
Yeah, until they run you out, and then you got to go find another one. But the advice would be simply, if you find something that works, scale it to the level that your life requires, But define what you want. Don't just take the big house or the big car or the crappy house or the crappy car because somebody else had it or somebody else believes that you can or should have it. Sit down, imagine your life in a state of ultimate happiness, and then reverse engineer that.
Good talk.
Good run. It was fun. So, thanks everybody for having the time and the care and the concern to join us in this conversation. Please hit us up if you have any questions, comments, concerns, that sort of thing. And until then, and as always, dream your life.
And live your dreams.
Okay, goodbye.
Bye-bye.